Hello, book friends. I'm Addie, and you are watching Books and Tea Time, and I am here to start a very special and very exciting reading vlog because in this video, we are going to be doing my trans rights readathon vlog. Today is St. Patrick's Day, and also the very first day of this year's trans rights readathon. This is the 4th annual trans rights readathon. I have participated in some capacity every year, but I don't think I've ever vlogged before. So I'm really excited to be doing this, and it's a little bit longer this year, which is nice. The readathon is from today, March 17th, through March 31st, which is Trans Day of Visibility. So we've got a good 2-week chunk to get our reading done, which is good because I have a lot of books on this TBR. But before we get into my specific TBR, what is the Trans Rights Readathon? So if you are not familiar, the Trans Rights Readathon was started by author Sim Kern as a way to uplift and promote and advocate for trans authors in a climate, specifically in the United States, but also in other places around the globe where there is an increase and influx of anti-trans legislation. And there is also a component of the readathon where you are meant to donate to a trans organization or to raise money for a trans organization. So for this video and for this year, I am once again going to be raising money for a local organization to me. I don't really do a donate based on how many books I read because I don't want my ability to read quickly to affect my donation. So I usually just do a flat donation every year no matter how much I read, and I just try to read as much as I can. But yeah, the goal of the readathon is to read, support, review, and uplift books written by and or featuring characters or narrators even under the trans umbrella. So trans folks, gender queer, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and two-spirit representation in any capacity, whether it's the author, the character, or even if you're listening to an audiobook, whoever the narrator is. So I have 8 books on this TBR, which I realize is a little bit ambitious, but I'm not really sure what I'm in the mood for, so I want to have a lot of options. So I do have a lot of options and a wide variety. We've got some horror, we've got some fantasy, we've got some romance, we've got some sci-fi. Okay, so let's quickly go through the TBR. Like I said, I don't know if we're going to get to all of these in this video, but regardless, I want to shout them out in case you want to read them or put them on your TBR. But if I don't read them in this video, I will be reading them at some point. So there's that. I do, however, know what I want to start with. So today we are going to be starting with a novella because I feel like reading a novella is a good omen, right? You know, I can hopefully read it quickly. I'll be feeling motivated and like I'm on a roll. So today we are going to be starting with The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. I grabbed this and another of their books from the library. So The Salt Grows Heavy. I have never read anything by Cassandra Khaw, but I've heard great things. This book is blurbed by T. Kingfisher and N.K. Jemisin, but I'm really, really excited. And it's just under 100 pages. So I feel like this is a great way to kick off the readathon. This is a horror retelling of The Little Mermaid. It says this is a razor-sharp and bewitching fairy tale of discovering the darkness in the world and the darkness within oneself. I love fairy tale retellings, but I specifically really like fairy tale retellings in the horror genre. That's one of the reasons I love T. Kingfisher so much. So I'm really excited to get into this one. Also, I grabbed the library at Hellebore, which I think is their newest title, because I just could not resist this cover. And also, let me read you the inside. There's a blurb from Olivia Blake, who is author of the Atlas 6 books. She describes this as a punk rock, eldritch god, carnage-fueled battle royale dark academia. I don't know if I'll immediately jump into this, but these are my only 2 physical books that I have to read for the video, so I thought it would be good to have some options. So we might not jump right into this, but this is definitely one that I'm excited about. I also have access to the audiobook for both of them, but I thought that it would be nice to have some things to physically read. But the rest of these, I have 1 ebook, and then the rest of these are all audiobooks. Okay, next up we have Queen of Faces by Petra Lord. This is one of the Libro FM arcs that I got, I think in February, and it says it's for fans of Leigh Bardugo, Olivia Blake, Brandon Sanderson, and R.F. Kuang. I am a fan of all of those authors, so I'm very excited. I'm a little hesitant because I've seen this billed as YA, and I don't love YA, but I'm still gonna give it a try. It says that it's a cutthroat magical academy sort of a story where our main character has to become an assassin or risk their body physically decaying until they just die. All I know is that it sounds interesting, and I've been seeing a lot of early hype and good reviews for it. After that, we have the only ebook on this list, which is an advanced reader copy that I got from NetGalley tally for The Unmagical Life of Briar Jones by Lex Croucher, whom I love and adore, author of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. I believe this might be their adult debut. It's a dark academia fantasy about our main character Briar, who gets rejected from magic school, and then I think later on in life kind of finds a way to become an employee at the school, and then starts uncovering dark secrets about this magic school. It comes out in June, so I'm excited to get to it. I love Lex Croucher. I also have the arc for Bridget and Gabe Are Not Okay, which is the sequel to Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, but I think that I would rather read this one for this video. For a little bit of horror, I have You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. This is another Libro arc that I got, I think in February, maybe in March, I'm not sure. It's a domestic suspense haunted house horror. I love haunted house horror, specifically haunted house horror that takes a particular lens, whether it is examining like racism or homophobia, transphobia, things like that, where you like are examining how those phobias manifest in the haunted house space and in the horror space in general. But anyway, I'm excited, looking forward to it. And this is C.G. Drews' adult debut as well. They are the author of Don't Let the Forest In. I also have the audiobook for This Princess Kills Monsters by Rye Herman, who is a bi and genderqueer author. And this is billed as Princess Bride meets Shrek. And that just sounds so good and unusual. Shrek is one of my favorite movies of all time, so I'm like, in any capacity that it is represented here, I am excited. But it's a classic sort of like quest fantasy. It says it's a feminist fairy tale satire, but that just sounds so delightful and interesting. If I'm in the mood for a little romance, I have the audiobook for A Lady for All Seasons by TJ Alexander, which features a gender fluid main character. It says it's a riotous Regency romp, features a marriage of convenience, and our main character ends up with 2 suitors and a fiance at one point. And I just have so many questions about that. I've never read anything by TJ Alexander, but I've heard great things about their stuff. And then last but not least, if I'm in the mood for a little sci-fi tinged horror, I have Womb City by Toto Samayase. This is an African futurist horror, and it says that it is a cyberpunk body hopping ghost story exploring motherhood, memory, and a woman's right to her own body, which just sounds so fantastic, set in a surveillance state where bodies are a government-issued resource. Welcome to the reading vlog. Welcome to the readathon. Like I said, today we are going to start with The Salt Grows Heavy. Once I have an update on our first book, I will come back on. Oh, also, before I forget, I want to, in every clip of this video, feature a recommendation of a book that I have read that would fall under the category of the Trans Rights Readathon, so that you can add them to your TBR if you haven't already. And also to make sure that this video is saturated with good recommendations for books by authors that are trans, non-binary, gender fluid, gender non-conforming, two-spirit, etc. So for my first recommendation for this clip, we have one of my all-time favorite authors, Rivers Solomon. Read anything and everything by Rivers Solomon, okay? Their published works include The Deep, An Unkindness of Ghosts, Model Home, and Sorrowland. I have read and love all of them. If you're looking for a good place to start with River Solomon, I would recommend either The Deep or Model Home. The Deep is a novella, so like I think that's always very accessible, having a shorter story. Really great, talks about a lot about history and memory, and it is, I think, a novel that is inspired by a song that was inspired by a poem that is about enslaved African women who jumped off of slave ships into the depths of the ocean when they were pregnant and when they were forced on the Middle Passage. The book is what if those women then became mermaids and their children then became mermaids, and like how this mer people community holds the memories and the trauma. It's so interesting. Highly recommend. There's so much packed into such a short novella. Model Home is also a haunted house horror, like I said, that examines parenthood and motherhood and sibling relationships within the haunted house space and also within the context of racism in a southern town. Our main characters are the only Black family that lives in like one of those like HOA communities, and the very real horrors and trauma and the intergenerational issues that come with living in America as a Black family. It was one of my best books of last year. I cannot recommend it enough. So yeah, that's my recommendation for this clip. Now I'm gonna go read and I'm gonna zip it and get stuff done. I'll talk to you soon. Peace out. Hello everybody. It has been several days since I started this vlog. I haven't had a whole lot of time to come on and film updates, but I have been reading my dang butt off. As we discussed in the first clip, my plan was to read The Salt Grows Heavy, and I finished that book in one sitting. It was so good. I devoured it on Tuesday, the day that the readathon started. And then because I enjoyed it so much, it was not my original intention to jump right into the library at Hellebore. I know I had mentioned that one was like sort of on the back burner, but because I enjoyed The Salt Grows Heavy so much, I jumped right into the audiobook actually because it was available on Libby. So I just downloaded it and I listened to the entirety of the library at Hellebore as well, both by Cassandra Khaw. So let's talk about both of those books and then we can talk about where I'm feeling like turning next. So let's start with The Salt Grows Heavy. This one is the one that is the sort of Little Mermaid fairy tale retelling adjacent story, although I will say I did not realize this until I finished the book, but I think the book itself has the novella and then it has a very short 6-page short story at the end, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Cassandra Khaw wrote a short story that is a retelling of The Little Mermaid. I cannot remember what the title of it is. And then The Salt Grows Heavy is a novella that they wrote that takes place after the events of the short story. So I read the novella and then at the very end I read the short story, and it really all makes sense in that sort of way. I will say the audiobook does not include the short story, so I'm really glad that I also had the physical copy. And I highly recommend that if you don't have the physical copy, I think you can find it online. So I highly recommend tracking that down and reading it. I don't think it's necessary, but it definitely adds to my enjoyment overall. But what I will say is I absolutely loved The Salt Grows Heavy. I want to say that I devoured it, but I think in truth, this book devoured me. It is so visceral. I mean, across both of the books that I read, this is my first experience with Cassandra Khaw and their writing. And when I tell you the number of times I read about intestines over the past few days, they take body horror and they absolutely conquer it. It is so good. Their spin on body horror, I feel like I haven't really read body horror up until this point. Just the amount of times that you are intimately acquainted with the viscera of a human form or even a non-human body, organs, intestines, and everything. It's gross. So if you're squeamish, that's definitely something to know. This was disgusting, but in a way that I just absolutely loved. I was eating it up. So like I said, this is taking place after the sort of short story retelling of The Little Mermaid. We are following this mermaid-like creature. What I really appreciate is that the mermaid at one point says to her traveling companion that mermaid is the closest thing that the human language can achieve for describing the being and the entity that she is and the people that she comes from, but it is not accurate. So I'm gonna use the word mermaid, but just keep that in mind. So our main character, who is not named throughout the book, her daughters have just devoured their father, the prince, who took our main character from the ocean and forced her to be his bride and to have his children. So her daughters are born and they devour the whole kingdom. They eat everybody, including their father, except for her and this plague doctor who was kind of, I think, sort of like an advisor to the king. So the two of them are kind of going on this journey because they're like, what do we do now? This kingdom that we lived in is now completely empty because, they ate everybody. So they're kind of just like, okay, let's just walk and see what we find. Maybe we'll land in another kingdom. Maybe we won't. So they've got this friendship that perhaps blossoms into something a little bit more. And they eventually stumble upon this weird cult of children. I don't want to say too much because it is a novella. This is literally less than 100 pages, so I don't want to get too much into the plot. What I will say is I loved the writing style so much. I feel like I'm not going to be able to accurately describe the feeling of reading Cassandra Khaw's work, but the best way that I can explain it is that, like, it is jarring, the language that they use, like the word choice and the combinations of words and sentences, just the way that they structure their stories. It's like almost like whiplash, but in a great way, like in a way that does not pull you out of the narrative, but like vortexes you further into it. It's like falling into the eye of a hurricane. It's gruesome, it's violent. They really, in both books, deal a lot with the idea of like a monster or like a monstrous person and examining that and giving it nuance and creating monstrous main characters that you just can't help but root for. But also there's just such a tender relationship between our main character and the witch doctor, who is non-binary, to the point that I was almost like tearing up a little bit at the end. This was so good, and I cannot recommend it enough, especially if you're like me and you're new to Cassandra Khaw. I think this is a fantastic place to start. It really introduced me to their writing style, their approach to storytelling, and also just like the dark reimagining and building upon this fairy tale narrative and using it to subvert the typical gender norms that are like woven through fairy tales and to break that down. It was just brilliant. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I originally gave it 4.5 stars, but I think I've been sitting with it and I think I'm gonna give it a 5. It was so good, and it immediately made me want to pick up The Library at Hellebore. The Library at Hellebore is more of a full-length novel, and this one is about this school, this academy that is more or less a prison for magical beings, magical people that have the potential to destroy the world. So I think the description on the inside of the dust jacket is like, this is a place for like the antichrists of their generation, people who are like the bringer of doom, the end of worlds. Magic very suddenly becomes not real, but becomes commercialized and like weaponized by capitalism, and then there are laws applied to it, and then these people are so powerful that they need to be confined and controlled and removed from larger society. So there's this school that operates under the guise of a school where our main character, Alessa, ends up being kidnapped and brought to this school. Some people consent to enrolling into the academy kind of for their own protection, or for other reasons, or are coerced into enrolling in this academy. And then others, like Alessa, are just straight up kidnapped and brought to this place because they're too powerful. This is a dual timeline story, so there's the before chapters where you're getting little bits about the characters and their interactions before the event of their graduation, and then upon their graduation, they find out some sinister realities about what is going to happen to them immediately upon graduating, and then there's like a few days after that event that are the after timeline, so you're bouncing back and forth between the two, which is interesting. Absolutely consistent with The Salt Grows Heavy in terms of the body horror, the viscera, so much more. I mean, it's longer, so there's just more of it, but the amount of times, again, that intestines are specifically referenced is more than my fair share of need to have heard intestines mentioned. Do you know what I mean? I will say I did enjoy this one, but I did not like it as much as The Salt Grows Heavy. I just found that I was a little bit, I was wanting a little bit more of the previous timeline. There's like good stuff that happens in the before timeline where you're seeing Alessa interacting with many of her fellow students, but it is all told a very short actual time. It moves very fast, which is engaging because it moves very quickly, but almost to the point that I felt like I had to pause sometimes and just process everything, like, and catch up with where the narrative needed me to be. And it was kind of just throwing a lot of things at you and not really thoroughly exploring all of those things. There were so many characters for how fast they are all introduced and how you get these piecemeal flashbacks of Alessa interacting with them. I just feel like there was too large of a cast of characters for me to really get attached to anybody. So that's like my main critique, I would say. But I really liked the premise, and I liked how all of our main characters are these monstrous figures. They are killers, they're murderers, they are very flawed, but nevertheless, Cassandra Khaw demonstrates their humanity and why they're deserving of being treated as humans, even though this institute is cannibalizing them and commodifying them and their magic, more or less. I do think that I would still recommend it. I think I ended up giving it like a 3.5, 3.75 stars, somewhere in that range. And I am very excited to continue reading from Cassandra Khaw. The next thing that I'm gonna pick up is the audiobook for A Lady for All Seasons by TJ Alexander. This is our Regency historical romance pick for the video. And then to wrap up the clip, I want to do my author/book recommendation spotlight. And for this clip, I'm going to be recommending another one of my all-time favorite auto-buy authors, Sarah Gailey. Literally everything that this human being has written is so good. I have read almost all of their stuff, and I recommend every single thing. Every single one. It is just, it's all so brilliant. And they have a new book coming out in May. Just a quick rundown of some of their books. You've got Upright Women Wanted, which is a dystopian post-apocalyptic story about outlaw radical librarians distributing radical literature. It's like a Western vibe too, so good. You've got the American Hippo Duology, which is 2 novellas about, it's like an alternate history about like what if the United States government imported hippos to replace cows when there was a beef shortage, but instead they started running wild and now they're just like loose in the Mississippi River and they ride them like horses. Just Like Home, which is another haunted house horror about our main character whose father was a serial killer who is now dead, but she has to return to her childhood home because her mother is dying. Also so disgusting, but also so good. Magic for Liars, which is sort of another magical school adjacent story, but you're following adults and there was like a magical murder and our main character is a investigator who is investigating this magical murder that took place, but her twin sister, or just her sister, I can't remember if they're twins or not, is a teacher at the school and is kind of like mixed up in all of the murder. The Echo Wife, which is a thriller, sci-fi kind of a story about this woman who discovers cloning technology and then her husband steals her work to clone her because she won't have his baby. Spread Me is their newest release to date. It is a erotic horror novel inspired by the movie The Thing, which I have not seen. One of the best books I've ever read, and it did make it into my top 10 books of 2025, so I can't recommend that enough. They also have 2, I believe, published graphic novels. One, Eat the Rich, self-explanatory, very good. And the other is Know Your Station, and it's about like if humans were on this ship traveling a far distance into space to colonize a new planet because like we destroyed Earth, and the working classes in the ship rebel against like the elite upper classes, and a lot of crazy stuff goes on. I think that's all of their stuff that I've read to date, but truly anything that they write is spectacular. And then their new book, which I have not read yet, it comes out in May, I think is about someone who escapes a cult of some kind, and I think the title is Make Me Believe. So those are my recommendations and my author recommendation for this clip. Also, call to action moment. I don't know when I'm gonna have edited this, and I hope that it'll still be relevant, but right now Congress is debating HR 7661, which is also known as the Stop the Sexualization of Children Act, which is basically a book banning bill that is incredibly vague and very dangerous. So call your members of Congress, encourage them to vote no to this bill. Support your libraries, support the right to read. I know that Unite Against Book Bans, American Library Association, and other such organizations have a lot of great information about this. If you're interested, please go look. But as a librarian and as a reader, I cannot stress enough how important it is that we maintain the right to read and that we do not support any legislation like this, which is a very obvious way of targeting specifically queer youth, but also just all queer folks in general. I know that's going to be one of my daily action items for myself during the readathon, so I just wanted to shout that out. And I'll be sure to include stuff from like the ALA and Unite Against Book Bans down below if you're interested in reading a little bit more. Without further ado, I'm gonna go start the audiobook for A Lady for All Seasons and clean my apartment. I love you all. Good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Peace out. Hello, friends. Okay, it has been a few more days and I have been terrible about updating this vlog, so apologies, but we're in the home stretch here of the readathon. Today is Sunday and I'm off today and also off tomorrow. The Trans Rights Readathon ends on Tuesday. I am here today to tell you about our third completed book because I absolutely inhaled, devoured, am obsessed with A Lady for All Seasons by TJ Alexander. This was so much fun. Exactly what I was in the mood for. Such a fantastic historical romance. I really enjoyed it. So let's talk about that. The audiobook was great. I did have the audiobook from Penguin Random House's audio service. Because I'm a librarian, I get a lot of the audio arcs and things. This came out earlier this month, so this is a new release, but it is not TJ Alexander's debut. They have a couple of contemporary romances that are like cooking, like chef kind of based romances that I have not read, but then they also have another Regency romance, Gentleman's Gentleman. I don't think, based on what I found online, I don't think that this is a series where like A Gentleman's Gentleman is the first one and A Lady for All Seasons is the second, but the covers look similar and I think they take place in like the same world with like characters that overlap, but they're not necessarily direct like sequels in the same series. So I'm definitely going to go back and read A Gentleman's Gentleman at some point very soon because I just had so much fun with the writing and just all of the queer drama of it all. It was so much fun. So I did not know this was going to be dual POV. It's mostly in our main character Verbina's perspective. Verbina Montrose is a young lady who needs to find a wealthy husband because her family, her father has lost a lot of their money recently, and so they desperately need her to marry. And she has a pretty fraught relationship with her parents, but she knows that she's, on the marriage mart, so to speak. Verbina is such a fun main character. She loves gossip and she's so good at like collecting the gossip and using it to maneuver through the world as a young woman who's looking for, some sort of safety and security. She's also just so witty and very funny and like hard-headed, but in a good way, like very determined. I just love her so much. She's a great character to read from, I will say, and a good friend. And I think based on some of the stuff that happens and like the things that are said in this book, I think she maybe features as a side character in A Gentleman's Gentleman. But anyway, so at the beginning of the book, Verbina's looking for a husband and her friend, one of her newly made friends, Etienne, has a public falling out with another man who she knows to be one of his ex-lovers. And so she proposes, what if we, strike up a marriage of convenience because I don't care what you do, you don't care what I do, but it will help to shield you from any public speculation about your sexuality and also like their friends. And so they strike up this deal that they're going to court each other publicly to draw the attention away from both of their situations, and then eventually they're going to marry at the end of the season. But then things start happening that throw a little bit of a wrench in the situation because we have a poetess, Flora Whitcomb, writes a poem about how this, courtship is a farce and how they are kind of just doing it to cover up and draw attention away from other things. So Verbina immediately tracks her down and is like, I am gonna give her a piece of my mind. I'm gonna get her to, retract her statement. And so she hunts Flora down and Flora immediately is like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with you. You're being so mean to me and I love it. Like, I would do anything for you. Basically, she, apologizes to Verbina and is like, I'll write a more salacious poem to draw attention away from your engagement again, and then they become friends. Okay, put a pin in that. Verbina's like, "Oh, why do I always want to spend time with her? We must just be really good friends. I haven't really had many female friends before." But then also, Flora, our other main character, is gender fluid and is also young William Forsythe, who is the sixth, I think, in a family of 6 boys, and so is trying to make a name for himself as a gothic novelist. And so he is like, okay, myself as Flora cannot openly pursue Verbina in public. William is also very attracted to her and really likes her, and so he's like, what if I court her publicly as William and kind of like get around Etienne, because like he's jealous of Etienne because like he knows that like something is up with their courtship, but like not really the details of what's going on. So William starts courting her, and then Flora and her are still flirting back and forth. And then this adorable, adorable Scottish man, Miles, comes on the scene, and he and Etienne immediately have a lot of chemistry. And so it is just like the most delightful queer like comedy of errors. It almost reads like Shakespearean in that sense, where you've got like this large cast of characters. There's like a lot of misunderstanding, not like in the typical like annoying miscommunication trope. Like it is just, it's so entertaining, and there's so much like queer joy and queer love. There are some really, really heartfelt coming out scenes, like on a one-on-one scale with like Flora, and also with William coming out and talking to other characters. And it's just, it was so much fun. It was so darling. I also cannot tell you how much I love that TJ Alexander writes Lord Byron as a side character into this book. And I don't know, you might not know this about me, but I studied English literature in college, and I wrote my like Bachelor of Philosophy thesis on Lord Byron. So I have a lot of weird Lord Byron knowledge, and he is just not a great person, but an absolutely chaotic bisexual, like the original, perhaps, chaotic bisexual. And I thought it was so fun and clever how TJ Alexander wrote him into the book, and how he's like sort of helping our main characters find their little queer happily ever after, but still being like very flawed and having like a very nuanced portrayal of him. I don't know. I just thought that was so good, and maybe not everybody will care for it in the way that I did, but I thought TJ Alexander did such a good job, and it was just so funny. Like Flora and Verbina would be talking, and then like he would come in and like try to insert himself into their conversation, and they would be like, oh my god, this guy. Or like he would like hit on William and Miles and like invite them back to his room, and they would be like, no. It's just, I don't know. It was really, really fun. I loved it. I would give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars, maybe even a 5-star. If you are into historical romance, like absolutely top tier historical romance, I would give it like honestly like a 2 or a 3 on the spice scale. Like there are spicy scenes, but they're not frequent. There are like open door scenes, so just keep that in mind if that's not something that you're interested in. I loved having a gender fluid main character and reading from both Flora and William's perspectives, and then how later on in the book, because of the support that they both receive individually, kind of like coming into their own and becoming more comfortable with letting people in. It was so good. Highly recommend. I love doing reading vlogs or like readathons or reading challenges, because I feel like every single time I'm able to find a new favorite author, and I am so lucky because I feel like I'm definitely going to read more from Cassandra Khaw, and I'm definitely going to read more from TJ Alexander. So we're thriving out here. The last book, what's probably going to be the last book on the docket for the video, is I started the audiobook for Womb City, and this one is definitely the longest book that we're going to read in the video. It's just over 400 pages, so I'm not sure how quickly I'm going to be able to finish finish it. I'm like 18% of the way through the audiobook. Before I talk to you about that, I think my plans for the evening, I need to tidy up around the apartment. I have a list of tasks that I need to accomplish. So I'm going to listen to Womb City while I, tidy up around the house. Then Alexander and I are going to eat dinner at some point. But then I think after that, I'll come on and tell you about my initial thoughts and a breakdown of Womb City, because it's a sci-fi cyberpunk horror and there's a lot going on in terms of like world building. So I want to be able to like break that down for you guys, because I do think it's important for me to be able to talk about that to give context for my other thoughts on the book. I'm enjoying it though so far. It is very disturbing, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Oh, I almost forgot. My recommendation for this clip, I thought I would stick with the romance theme and recommend Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. I read this a couple years ago. It is also kind of a food romance, but it is basically like a cooking show romance where our two main characters are competing against each other and other people on this cooking show, and they strike up a little bit of a romance. And I just remember loving it so much. It's a really great romance story. If I'm remembering it correctly, I can't remember their names, but our one main character is, I think, either pansexual or queer. I can't remember specifically how she identifies. And our other main character is non-binary. So it's a lot of great representation and another really great instance of just like some fun queer love, queer joy. On that note, I will check back in a little bit to talk more about Womb City. I'll talk to you soon. Peace out. Hello. Okay, it's the next day. It's Monday. We're on our second to last day of the readathon. I'm officially 30% of the way through Womb City, and so I'm gonna come back on later to talk to you guys about my initial thoughts on that. But right now, I have to go pick up our grocery order in a little bit, but I wanted to stop by the bookstore. I'm at Half Price Books right now, so I'm gonna go in and see if I can find anything that is on my wish list, including I'm like really hoping they might have The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw, because I would love to own it because I enjoyed it so much. So I'm just gonna go in and look around and see what I can find, and fingers crossed that the trans rights readathon gods, goddesses, deities of the world will bless our shopping today and we will find some good stuff. For this clip, I'm gonna recommend a memoir that I read several years ago now, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This book I think was the #1 banned book in 2024 according to last year's National Library Association report. So please go out and read this. It's like a coming of age memoir about George M. Johnson's youth and their life and how they sort of came into understanding their queerness and their identity and their relationships to their family members. I would check the trigger warnings on it just to be safe, to protect yourselves, but it was wonderful, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the audiobook is read by the author. So that's my recommendation for this clip. Let's go in and everybody cross your fingers that we have a good little shopping spree. But I have like 20 minutes, so I also have to be quick about it. Bye. Okay, we're back. It's like 20 minutes later, more like 30 actually, if I'm being honest. And we did get one. I was not quite as lucky as I was hoping I would be, but I think probably the deities that I called upon were looking down on me like, girl, where are you gonna put all these books you're hoping to find on your shelves? And you know what? They are correct. But I did snag a copy of What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher. This is the second book in the What Moves the Dead series. Or no, excuse me, it's the Sworn Soldier series. What Moves the Dead is the first book, sorry. But this is the second book in an ongoing series. There's 3 books out right now. The third one is What Stalks the Deep. I read that last fall. Really loved it. I love T. Kingfisher. It also has these gorgeous end pages which I'm really excited about. But yeah, so I'm also going to use this as my recommendation for this clip, because even though T. Kingfisher is not a trans or non-binary author, this series features a non-binary main character, and this whole series is really great. It's like horror novellas that are inspired by fairy tales and other stories. The first one is a retelling of something by Edgar Allan Poe. Good lord, why can I not think of what it's called? It's like a nature mushroom horror. This one is inspired by folktale about creatures that like sleep on your chest when you're asleep and suck your life out. And the third one is set in a haunted coal mine in West Virginia or Virginia, I forget which one. But yeah, okay, I have to go get our groceries and then pick us up lunch, and then when I get home I'll talk to you a little bit more about Womb City. Hello everybody, it is later on in the evening, but I am 40% of the way through Womb City. Tomorrow is the last day of the readathon, so I don't know if we're gonna finish it, but we're gonna do our best, and at the very least I'll leave you with my thoughts tomorrow on where I get up to. But I wanted to talk really quickly with you about it before I go to bed. I am enjoying it. It's very, very weird. I feel like, so I'm listening to it. I do have the physical copy checked out, but I'm primarily listening to it, and then every once in a while I'll like tandem read it, and I do feel like I'm missing maybe some things or some context. I don't know, it's like a little confusing, and I feel like it's more on me for listening to it and not grasping it quite fully, and not necessarily as much on the book. I have a lot of questions, and I'm not sure if it's because we as the reader aren't meant to know the answer yet, or if it's because it's just kind of going over my head. But this is a body hopping Afrofuturist sci-fi horror story, and our main character Nela is trying to get pregnant. She's trying to have a baby, and she's been having a lot of difficulty conceiving. And in this world, bodies are sort of like a resource distributed by the government, because they have achieved the scientific feat of basically each person gets an allotted 210 years that they can live for, but that's broken up into lifespans of 70 years where they can inhabit one body, and then they can choose to switch bodies, and the memories don't always carry over, but it's sort of like you quickly learn that very rich people who have more privilege and power are able to keep their memories from body to body, whereas other folks aren't. And another added layer of this is that anybody who has committed a crime, and most criminals in this society are women, because this surveillance state monitors gender and sexuality through this body hopping system, this complex. Most of the criminals are women who have, even if you are inhabiting a body that is new to you, but the person who was in the body before commits a crime, you as the new consciousness in that body have to have a microchip implanted in the back of your neck, and you have to pass these regular evaluations to prove that you don't harbor those criminal tendencies. So there's a lot of discussion here about consciousness and how that relates to personhood and individual identity, but also how memory plays into that, and like how can you be a person if you don't have those memories from your past? Like, how do you connect to your own sense of self if you don't have those memories? But then also the body kind of carrying any sort of knowledge outside of that. It's very fascinating. There's just so many layers to it, and like I said, I'm very interested in how all of that comes together and interacts, and the way that this society is functioning as a critique of our own in many ways. This also does take place in Botswana, so it is a non-United States based, non-Eurocolonial lens, but I think that it can definitely, there's a lot of arguments being made that apply to the way that our state is becoming a surveillance state. So it's very interesting, and I'm quite enjoying that element of it, and like just thinking about the way that this society that is being created controls specifically women, but also people who have committed a crime, who have been incarcerated at one point. There's a lot of interesting arguments being made there as well, I think. So I'm really enjoying it. Like I said, I just feel like some things are going over my head. Not sure if it's the book and the way that it's written. I think it's probably a little bit more the way that I'm consuming it. Like, I feel like if I had like multiple highlighter colors and I was sitting down and annotating it and tracking it and being really crazy about it, I could probably be following these threads a little more smoothly. What are you doing? Why are you licking that? But anyway, so our main character, Nayla, is one of these microchipped individuals. So the body that she currently inhabits in a previous life, when someone else's consciousness was in that body, they committed a crime. So she has this microchip and she has to be regularly tested. And then on top of that, she's having trouble conceiving. She and her husband can't have a baby. She's had several miscarriages, but she wants to be a mother so badly. And so another external facet of like the scientific development of this world is that people who are uber rich and have the means can use these things called womb incubators, like incubators but for the womb, to create babies. And like you can customize your baby and like choose the gender and choose like visual, like how they're gonna look and things like that. And so our main character Nayla and her husband Elifasi have decided to go down this route because they really want to have a baby, but their marriage is a little bit rocky. Not everything is going the way that Nayla expected it. His behavior changed a lot after they got married, and so there's like the domestic unease and unrest in their relationship, on top of the fact that we have our main character who's really just struggling with the feeling of never being her own self and having just like this external control and always being watched. The anxiety that's attached to that, I feel like, is coming through really well in the narrative. About like 25% of the way into the book, Nayla gets into a car accident and ends up having to dispose of a body. And then the ghost of the person starts haunting her. I'm just getting to the point where that is really like ramping up, but I think that's where like the ghost story element of the book comes in. I really also enjoy that how the author is examining gender in this landscape where bodies don't necessarily equal personhood. And it has been mentioned in the book that people can choose to switch their consciousness into a body that they feel best suits them. So you can transition into a different body. But because Nayla is a microchipped person, she does not have the same rights as everybody else. So she's also running into a lot of emotions where she feels like she's trapped in this specific body that does not allow her to exist and express herself in the way that she would like. It seems like she would rather be in a body and express in such a way that it is more gender non-conforming, but because she is sort of like shoehorned into this role, especially in her marriage, where her husband and his colleagues and his job are very much focused on the idea of the family and the subservient wife figure. She's kind of being forced into this box. But there's a lot of components that I'm really enjoying. I'm liking it a lot. The audiobook is really good. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish it by the end of the day tomorrow, but we're going to try. My recommendation for this clip is going to be the Singing Hills Cycle series by Nevo. This is a series of novellas, also featuring a non-binary main character who's a cleric, and basically each installment of this series is our main character, Cleric Chi, traveling to a different community in this sort of like fantastical but also historical China. Cleric Chi travels to the different communities and collects oral histories, and then brings them back to the monastery that they live at. And it's kind of just like all of these stories are housed and collected in this monastery. Hi. Get out of here.
Filming. Hey, books and tea time. Hey, little teacups. How's it going? Tea time's teacups.
Is that what we're calling them?
Subscribe to the channel.
Okay, anyway, so that's my recommendation for this clip. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Hello there, friends. I was so preoccupied editing the footage for this vlog so that I could get it out in a timely manner that I forgot to film the outro. So now that I have edited it, I need to do that. So it is now April. The readathon is over. I wanted to come on for some last minute updates before I end the video. First things first, before we get to the end of readathon housekeeping things, I am nearly done with Womb City because I think on March 31st I had read about 40% of this, but it's now April 5th and I have like 40 pages left. Oh my god, did this book pick up steam very quickly. I would say that the first 40% of this, I spent a lot of time wrapping my mind around the concept of this book and the world building, which is not bad. It's just to say that, like, for the beginning, you're gonna be a little confused. You're gonna have a lot of questions. Just stick along for the ride, because once you hit like 40%, things escalate so quickly, and I am loving where this book is going. It is gonna be at least a 4-star, if not higher, depending on if it sticks the landing, which I imagine that it will. I just don't know if I've ever read something that is quite so gruesome and devastating, but at the same time moving. It's very like mind-bendy and weird, and just the idea that like consciousnesses and bodies are separate entities and that you can move consciousnesses. There's a lot of that like scientific or like Afrofuturist mythological element to it that you really have to take a moment to fully grasp. But once you do, and once that starts clicking, the narrative just like absolutely takes off from there. And the last 100 pages that I read are getting really wild. There's a lot of revelations. So yeah, I'm definitely really liking it, and stay tuned. I'll be talking about this in more detail and with my rating in my April wrap up. But yeah, that was the fourth and final book. So we read like 3.5 books for the readathon, which I think is pretty good. About what I expected. I know that I had a lot of books on this TBR. I obviously am going to be reading the ones that I didn't get to later on in the year. I'm thinking about doing a dedicated reading vlog for The Unmagical Life of Briar Jones and Bridget and Gabe Are Not Okay, which are Lex Croucher's 2 books coming out this year. They're both coming out in the summer. So I might do a little dedicated advanced reader copy vlog for those. I did on the 31st, which is Trans Day of Visibility. I decided that instead of doing one large donation on the 31st, I actually set up a recurring monthly donation to the local organization that I raise money for. It is Black and trans led, and I just feel like I want to be doing more on a regular basis, so I thought that it would be hopefully more impactful to commit to a regular monthly donation to the organization than just like the one-time yearly thing. To wrap up this video, again, I just wanted to recenter on one of the main tenets of this readathon, which is advocacy and advocating for the trans people in our communities, and specifically as cis people, how to step to the forefront and to bring attention to these issues and to be the ones advocating for legislation and systemic change that supports and protects trans communities. So with that in mind, I just wanted to shout out a couple of things to keep an eye on just that have come to my attention recently, in addition to HR 7661, which is the book banning bill that I'm going to have information and stuff about in the description box. The state of Kansas passed legislation that basically overnight made trans licenses invalid, which takes away the mobility and the ability to work and get food and access basic needs of trans people in the community. Also, Idaho, I think, is in the process of passing the most aggressive anti-trans bathroom bill, I think, ever. Basically, there would be felony penalties for trans people using the bathroom in public spaces. And then also, trans athletes are under attack both in the United States and abroad. The International Olympic Committee just said that trans female athletes aren't going to be able to participate in female sports. I think these are just things that we need to be aware of, need to be paying attention to. I don't know how much calling representatives and signing petitions do. I know that it is really just one pillar of a vast foundation that we need to build to support marginalized communities. If empathy for trans folks is not enough to motivate you, which, to be clear, that should be enough to motivate anybody. Empathy should be enough to convince you that every human being deserves the same basic rights. But if it's not, for some reason, or if you just needed this reminder today, this is not just about trans folks. They are the most vulnerable right now, but it does not end there. All of this legislation is just the building block for things that are going to affect everybody, because they are at their core fundamentally supporting a heteronormative, cisnormative, white supremacist, capitalist society that does not have any human interests at its heart. That's the end of the video. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. It means the world to me. I love you all, and extra special love and virtual hugs to all of the trans folks out there, all of the queer folks out there. You are all meant to be here. You deserve to be here. You have a right to the whole world and more, and I love you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam, and I hope to see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, happy living. Peace out.